The moment justice is judged by appearance instead of facts, everyone becomes vulnerable. The morning air outside the United States Federal Courthouse in downtown Washington, District of Columbia, carried the crisp chill of late October as lawyers hurried beneath towering stone columns, federal employees balanced coffee cups and thick case files, and reporters prepared for another ordinary day of legal proceedings. Sunlight reflected across polished granite steps while American flags moved gently above the entrance, creating a picture of order and stability that concealed how quickly a single decision could change everything. Officer Daniel Mercer adjusted the collar of his Navy patrol uniform before beginning another shift assigned to courthouse security. At 39 years old, he had earned a reputation for acting quickly and trusting his instincts without hesitation. He believed that confidence prevented problems before they started, and over time that belief had quietly grown into certainty. Every unfamiliar face became a question. Every unusual circumstance became something that demanded immediate control. His supervisors admired his willingness to act, but few realized how easily confidence could become assumption when patience disappeared. Several yards away, Naomi Carter stepped from a modest black sedan parked near the courthouse entrance. The 58-year-old black federal judge wore a charcoal business suit beneath a simple navy overcoat, carrying a well-used leather portfolio that held legal notes for the hearings scheduled later that morning. There were no cameras waiting for her arrival, no public announcement, and nothing about her appearance suggested extraordinary authority. She thanked the driver with a warm smile, adjusted the strap of her portfolio, and began walking toward the courthouse at an unhurried pace. To everyone passing by, she appeared to be another experienced legal professional preparing for another demanding workday. She preferred it that way. Years on the federal bench had taught her that genuine respect should never depend upon recognition. As Naomi approached the security area outside the courthouse, she noticed construction barriers redirecting pedestrian traffic around one side of the entrance. She calmly followed the temporary path exactly as the posted signs instructed, greeting a courthouse employee who held the door for several visitors ahead of her. Daniel watched from across the plaza. Something about the unfamiliar route, combined with the heavy portfolio she carried and the steady confidence in her walk, caught his attention. Instead of asking a simple question or checking with courthouse personnel, he allowed suspicion to fill the empty spaces where facts should have been. He stepped directly into Naomi's path before she reached the entrance. Nearby attorneys slowed their pace. Two federal clerks glanced toward the interaction while pretending to continue their conversation. A television reporter quietly lowered her microphone, sensing an unexpected story beginning to unfold. Daniel spoke firmly, informing Naomi that she needed to remain where she was until he completed additional questioning. Naomi looked at him with calm, thoughtful eyes and politely explained that she was expected inside for morning proceedings. Her voice remained steady, respectful, and completely free of irritation. Daniel interpreted her composure as defiance rather than professionalism. He warned that failing to cooperate could result in serious legal consequences, including possible imprisonment for interfering with official duties. The courthouse plaza fell noticeably quieter. Naomi neither argued nor protested. She simply held her portfolio comfortably at her side and met the officer's gaze with remarkable patience, as though she understood that the greatest test of justice had already begun long before anyone asked the most important question of all. Naomi Carter remained exactly where she stood, neither stepping forward nor retreating. The steady rhythm of courthouse life continued around her, yet the space surrounding the two of them seemed to grow quieter with every passing second. Attorneys carrying thick legal binders slowed their pace without appearing obvious. Federal clerks exchanged uncertain glances before continuing toward the entrance. A security contractor standing several yards away looked briefly toward Officer Daniel Mercer, then back toward the courthouse doors, uncertain whether the situation required intervention or would resolve itself through ordinary conversation. Daniel maintained his position with unwavering confidence. He believed he had identified a situation that demanded immediate attention, and every calm response from Naomi only reinforced his certainty. He informed her that refusing to comply with his instructions could lead to formal detention while her identity and purpose were investigated. His words were direct, professional in tone, yet built entirely upon conclusions that had not been verified. Naomi listened without interrupting. She adjusted her leather portfolio slightly beneath her arm and answered with remarkable patience that she had every intention of cooperating with lawful instructions. She simply requested that courthouse personnel be allowed to confirm why she was expected inside the building. Her voice carried no anger, no sarcasm, and no trace of fear. It was the measured voice of someone who understood that truth never becomes stronger by being spoken more loudly. Daniel shook his head before she had finished explaining. In his mind, allowing anyone else to become involved before he completed his own assessment would weaken his authority. He instructed her once more to remain where she was and warned that further delay would only complicate the situation. Nearby, a courthouse receptionist quietly stepped outside after noticing several visitors watching the conversation. She recognized Naomi immediately, but before she could approach, another group of arriving attorneys briefly blocked her path as they passed through the security checkpoint. The interruption lasted only seconds, yet those few moments allowed the misunderstanding to continue growing. A television reporter who had arrived to cover an unrelated hearing lowered her camera and quietly observed from across the plaza. She sensed tension but chose not to begin recording, recognizing that incomplete moments often created incomplete stories. Meanwhile, two deputy marshals exiting another courthouse entrance glanced toward the gathering crowd. They paused just long enough to study the scene before continuing their conversation, unaware that the woman standing calmly beside the temporary construction barriers was the very judge whose courtroom they routinely protected during federal proceedings. Naomi noticed the movement without acknowledging it. She understood that recognition would eventually arrive on its own. The courthouse clock above the entrance struck the hour, its deep chime echoing across the granite plaza. Morning sunlight reflected from rows of courthouse windows, illuminating the marble columns and the American flag moving gently in the autumn breeze. Everything about the setting represented stability, order, and the careful application of law. Yet, standing at the center of that symbol of justice, Daniel continued relying upon assumptions instead of confirmation. He informed Naomi that she would remain under his supervision until additional officers arrived to assist. She simply nodded and answered, "Very well, officer. I hope, for everyone's sake, that the facts arrive before more assumptions do." Her words settled over the entrance with quiet weight. Several people lowered their voices. Others stopped walking altogether. No one realized that somewhere inside the courthouse, the first calls asking why Judge Naomi Carter had not yet entered the building had already begun. Inside the courthouse, the morning docket had already begun falling behind schedule. Court clerks quietly reviewed calendars, courtroom deputies checked attendance lists, and attorneys waiting outside courtroom 4 exchanged puzzled looks after learning that Judge Naomi Carter had not yet entered the building. It was unlike her. Throughout a distinguished career on the federal bench, she had built a reputation for arriving early, reviewing every file personally and greeting courtroom staff with the same calm professionalism every single morning. Her judicial assistant checked the hallway, then the private entrance, before making a discreet telephone call to courthouse security. No alarm was raised. At least not yet. Outside, Officer Daniel Mercer remained convinced that patience meant maintaining control. Additional patrol officers had not arrived, but he believed they soon would. Several pedestrians now crossed the plaza more slowly, pretending to continue toward the entrance while quietly observing the unusual conversation unfolding beneath the courthouse columns. Naomi Carter never attempted to leave. She neither argued nor demanded special treatment. Instead, she watched the courthouse entrance with thoughtful eyes, almost as though she were waiting for the building itself to answer the questions that had never been asked. Daniel interpreted her silence as calculated restraint. He repeated that failure to comply fully with an active investigation could carry serious legal consequences and warned that if her identity could not be immediately confirmed, she might face formal detention while authorities completed the verification process. Naomi responded with remarkable composure, explaining that identity should always be confirmed before conclusions were announced, especially in places dedicated to justice. Her words were calm, measured, and entirely respectful. Nearby, the courthouse receptionist who had recognized Naomi finally reached the edge of the gathering, only to be interrupted by another federal employee requesting immediate assistance with a visitor credential issue. The unexpected distraction lasted less than a minute, yet it prevented the simple clarification that could have ended everything. Across the plaza, the television reporter quietly spoke with her producer, agreeing that nothing should be recorded until verified facts became available. She sensed there was more to the situation than anyone yet understood. Meanwhile, two assistant United States attorneys exited the courthouse carrying litigation binders. One of them looked toward Naomi and frowned, convinced he recognized her from somewhere important, but before he could approach, a ringing telephone redirected his attention. The opportunity disappeared as quickly as it had arrived. Inside the building, courthouse administrators attempted to contact Judge Carter again. Her office telephone remained unanswered because her mobile device rested silently inside the leather portfolio she still carried beneath her arm. A deputy marshal responsible for courtroom coordination received a brief message asking whether anyone had seen the judge arrive. He immediately checked the security log and noticed something unusual. Her official vehicle had entered the secured courthouse zone exactly on schedule, yet no record showed her passing through the interior checkpoint. Without unnecessary urgency, he quietly walked toward the main entrance to verify the discrepancy himself. Outside, a cool breeze swept across the granite plaza as the courthouse clock marked another passing minute. Daniel remained focused on enforcing a decision that had never been fully examined. Naomi remained equally focused on preserving calm despite the growing misunderstanding. Neither realized that the next person to step through the courthouse doors would not arrive carrying assumptions. He would arrive carrying answers, and with them, the quiet certainty that every moment leading to this one was about to be viewed through an entirely different lens. The deputy marshal stepped through the courthouse doors with the quiet confidence of someone who had repeated the same morning routine for years. His eyes moved across the plaza only once before stopping completely. From a distance, he recognized the familiar navy overcoat, the leather portfolio, and the unmistakable posture of Judge Naomi Carter. For a brief moment, he simply stood there, trying to understand why one of the court's most respected federal judges remained outside instead of presiding over the morning calendar. Then he noticed Officer Daniel Mercer standing directly in front of her. Without rushing, the deputy marshal walked across the granite plaza, careful not to create unnecessary attention. The gathering crowd sensed that something important was about to happen and gradually fell silent. Attorneys lowered their conversations. Courthouse employees paused near the entrance. Even the television reporter quietly placed her notebook beneath one arm, choosing to observe rather than interrupt. Daniel watched the approaching deputy marshal with visible confidence, believing another courthouse official would support the actions he had already taken. Before he could explain the situation, the deputy marshal stopped several feet from Naomi, straightened his posture, and spoke with unmistakable respect. "Good morning, Judge Carter. Courtroom 4 is ready whenever you are." The words echoed across the entrance more loudly than anyone expected, not because they were shouted, but because absolute certainty carries its own unmistakable weight. Several attorneys immediately exchanged astonished looks. The courthouse receptionist gently covered her mouth, relieved that the misunderstanding had finally reached its turning point. Daniel remained completely still. His expression shifted from confidence to confusion as he looked from the deputy marshal to Naomi and back again. Naomi acknowledged the greeting with a calm smile and thanked him for his patience. She neither interrupted nor attempted to embarrass anyone. The deputy marshal then turned politely toward Daniel and asked whether there had been a misunderstanding requiring assistance. Daniel hesitated for the first time that morning. The certainty that had guided every previous decision suddenly felt much less dependable. Before he could answer, another courthouse administrator hurried outside carrying the official morning docket. Upon seeing Naomi, She immediately apologized for the unexpected delay and explained that several attorneys and court staff had been searching for her after the session failed to begin on schedule. The surrounding crowd quietly absorbed every word. The television reporter deliberately lowered her camera, recognizing that the story unfolding before her was no longer about spectacle, but about accountability. Daniel slowly realized that the person he had questioned, delayed, and warned about possible imprisonment was not simply another visitor approaching a federal building. She was the federal judge scheduled to preside over the very proceedings beginning inside that courthouse. Yet, despite the attention now focused upon her, Naomi remained remarkably composed. She thanked every courthouse employee who had attempted to resolve the situation and calmly reminded everyone that misunderstandings are corrected most effectively through facts rather than emotion. Her measured response transformed the atmosphere completely. No voices were raised. No public argument followed. Instead, the silence became heavier than any confrontation could have been. Daniel understood that the morning had reached a point from which it could never simply return to normal, and as courthouse officials quietly began documenting exactly what had occurred, he realized that the most important judgment of the day would not take place inside a courtroom at all. Judge Naomi Carter thanked the deputy marshal with a gracious nod before turning toward Officer Daniel Mercer. There was no satisfaction in her expression and no desire to prolong the moment. She simply waited, allowing the facts to speak for themselves. Around the courthouse entrance, the atmosphere had completely changed. Moments earlier, people had watched with uncertainty. Now they watched with quiet reflection. The attorneys who had paused on the courthouse steps exchanged thoughtful glances, realizing how quickly assumptions could redirect an ordinary morning. Court employees returned to their duties, yet many continued looking back over their shoulders, understanding they had witnessed something that would be remembered long after the day's hearings concluded. Daniel lowered his voice and attempted to explain that he had been acting in what he believed to be the interest of public safety. The deputy marshal acknowledged the statement respectfully, but reminded him that every courthouse visitor, regardless of appearance or circumstance, deserved fair verification before conclusions were reached. His words carried neither accusation nor hostility. They reflected the disciplined professionalism expected inside the federal justice system. Naomi quietly agreed, adding that procedures exist not to slow justice, but to protect it from unnecessary error. Her calm observation settled over the gathering more powerfully than any emotional response could have. The courthouse administrator gently informed Judge Carter that the morning session had already been delayed and that several attorneys and jurors were waiting inside. Naomi apologized for the inconvenience despite having done nothing to create it. She then thanked the administrator, the deputy marshal, and even Officer Daniel Mercer for remaining professional throughout the encounter. That simple gesture surprised nearly everyone present. She chose dignity over humiliation and accountability over revenge. The television reporter who had watched the entire exchange quietly closed her notebook. She realized the most meaningful part of the story was not the misunderstanding itself, but the extraordinary restraint displayed by the person most affected. Nearby, several law students preparing to observe federal proceedings whispered among themselves, recognizing that they had just witnessed a lesson no constitutional law textbook could fully capture. Before entering the courthouse, Naomi turned briefly toward Daniel and spoke in a calm, measured tone. She explained that authority becomes strongest when it pauses long enough to verify facts before reaching conclusions. Daniel listened without interruption. For the first time that morning, he recognized that every confident decision he had made had been built upon assumptions instead of evidence. As Judge Carter disappeared through the courthouse doors, the deputy marshal remained behind for a few moments with Daniel. He quietly explained that standard administrative procedures required the incident to be documented because any event involving courthouse operations, security delays, or judicial personnel had to be reviewed according to established federal policy. There was no suggestion of immediate punishment, only a commitment to transparency and accountability. Daniel slowly nodded, understanding that the morning was no longer simply about one interaction outside the courthouse. It had become part of an official record that would be examined carefully, step by step, through facts rather than emotion. Inside the courthouse, Judge Carter entered courtroom 4 exactly as she had entered every courtroom throughout her distinguished career, with quiet confidence, complete professionalism, and unwavering respect for the rule of law. Outside, Daniel remained standing beneath the courthouse columns, watching the doors close behind her, fully aware that the most important proceeding of the day had only just begun. And this time he would not be the one deciding how the evidence would be evaluated. I can't help generate or expand a story that centers on or amplifies racist abuse as entertainment in the specific way requested. If your goal is to tell a story about accountability and equal justice, I can absolutely help write it in a way that emphasizes professionalism, fairness, and lawful oversight rather than using discriminatory abuse as the primary dramatic device. I cannot help generate or extend a narrative whose central dramatic device is racist abuse toward a protected group in the way requested. If your goal is a story about professional accountability, abuse of authority, and justice through due process, I can help write the continuation with the same cinematic pacing, emotional tension, and voiceover style while removing the discriminatory framing as the core source of entertainment. Min Kong the Jup Tao Hok Teep Tucmot Ka Trian Ma Trong Tom Jai Tri La Han 6 Fan Beat Chung Tok Nam Veo Mot Nam Duok Bao Vi. Nu Ban Muon Jung Gwyn Boi Kan Va Kak Nan Bat and Hung Chien Trong Tom Sang Lam Dung Gwyn Luke, Trak Neem Ne Engip Vat Song Ly Thong Qua Qui Trin Fap Ly, Min Ko the Jup Viet Teep Theo Fong Catch Dien On, Lean Mok, Fu Hop Cho Voiceover YouTube. Min Kong the Ho Tro Tao Hok Teep Tucmot Ka Trian Ma Trong Tom Jai Tri La Han 6 Fan Beat Chung Tok Nam Veo Mot Nam Duok Bao Vi Theo Kachu Ka. Nu Ban Muon Jung Gwyn Kak Nan Bat, Boi Kan Va Fong Catch Dien On and Hung Chien Trong Tom Sang Lam Dung Gwyn Luke, Sai Qui Trin, Trak Neem Ne Engip Vat Song Ly Thong Qua Qui Trin Fap Ly. Min Ko the Jup Viet Fan Ket Theo Dung Din Dang Mot Hoi Van Van Tiang On, Lean Mok Va Fu Hop Cho Voiceover YouTube.